And right now, we'd like to welcome the first presentation, the Harker School from San Jose, California. If you could please come up to the stage.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Saloni Shah.
And I'm Andrew.
And we're sophomores from the Harker School. Our CIF 2019 presentation is titled, "We Can't Go On Like This, a proposal for non-proliferation with analysis of the current nuclear state of the world." So just to start off, our world in the 21st century continues to be shaped by the dangers of nuclear hostility. With continued growing dangers of nuclear conflict with Middle East unpredictability, India and Pakistan tensions, US and North Korea failing efforts, and the US-Russia rivalry, some countries continue to prioritize nuclear deterrence in their military defense plans.
As we approach the 75th anniversary of the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings, it's important to not forget the devastation and destruction caused by nuclear warfare. As for state policy that is oriented to preventing nuclear warfare in the future, the main policy we see currently is nuclear deterrence, with the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. We'd also like to point out the importance of terrorism and its role that it plays in national security today. As terrorist threats become more and more dangerous in the future, we must keep an open eye and beware that instability could be caused by terrorist groups. So today in this presentation, we'll first be talking about the history and current status of nuclear weapons, and then going on to talk about the current treaties and the obstacles that have led to, between denuclearization, and lastly, we'll be going over our proposal with policy recommendations. So here we introduce the current status of nuclear weapon states as outlined by the NPT. They're first nuclear weapon states, and there's also non-nuclear weapon states. For nuclear weapon states, there are China, France, Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. China, France, and the United Kingdom roughly have 200 to 300 active nuclear weapons in their arsenals each, while the US and Russia have roughly 8,000 in their stockpiles apiece. In this presentation, we'll be mainly focusing on the NPT non-nuclear weapon states, in particular India, Pakistan, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and Israel. India and Pakistan have been embroiled in a decades-long conflict that dates back into the 70s and even before. As for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, they have been steadily developing their nuclear arsenals, but have recently reached out for negotiations. And thirdly, Israel maintains its nuclear program as a secretive one and does not confirm or deny that it has nuclear weapons. So one of the most important conflicts right now in the world regarding nuclear weapons is that of the US versus Russia, dating all the way back to the Cold War. There are a lot of treaties that have tried to deal with these issues of proliferation, including START, New START, among others. But today we'd like to focus on the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF, signed in 1987. By the 1991 deadline, over 2,600 nuclear missiles that were land-based were eliminated by this program, and this treaty has continued on with Russia into the current day, and there's been a lot of de-escalation from the peak of the Cold War. However, there have been recent tensions that have compromised this treaty. In 2014, the Obama administration alleged that Russia was violating the INF, and this accusation has continued into subsequent years. And in 2019, President Trump, in fact, withdrew the U.S. from the INF, and just days later, Russia's government did so as well. And after this, we've experienced somewhat of an increase in tensions, with Russia announcing a couple hours later that they would in fact start a new program for sea-based missile development to increase their nuclear weapons.
The JCPOA is a treaty that aimed to limit Iran's nuclear capability. It's between Iran and China, France, Russia, the UK, United States, and Germany, and it was put in place by lifting economic sanctions. The goal of the treaty was to reduce centrifuges, reduce the uranium stockpile, remove and disable the heavy water reactor, and increase international monitoring. However, in May 2018, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from this treaty, citing it as disastrous and an embarrassment. He also cited Iran's interference in Iraq, Lebanon, Syrian, and Yemen affairs, its ability to continue to enrich uranium, and growth in Iran's military budget by 40% as reasons for withdrawal. The U.S. lost a lot of trust by withdrawing from this deal, so which raises two questions for Iran. Will Iran stick to the deal, or will it turn into an aggressor? Saudi Arabia's is very similar to Iran because, as of current, it is a non-nuclear weapon state, but they have announced their intentions to construct 16 nuclear reactors. However, they have threatened to develop nuclear weapons if Iran does so. So to avoid this crisis, all potential suppliers must agree to only supply nuclear fuel and technology to Saudi Arabia for civilian nuclear cooperation. North Korea is a nuclear weapon state that has approximately 60 nuclear weapons. They are currently conducting, and they have been conducting, long-range missile testing. Through its keen desire to increase nuclear capabilities, there have been escalating conflicts between the leaders. In 2017, Trump proclaimed fire and fury upon North Korea and called Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man, escalating the conflicts even more between the two leaders. Tensions were only mitigated once South Korean President Moon Jae-in orchestrated a first-ever summit between the two leaders, and the goal of the summit was to work towards CVID, or complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. Although there were no results from the second Hanoi summit, there is an improvement of relations between the US and North Korea, and we can only hope that this continues. As Andrew mentioned earlier, India and Pakistan have been embroiled in a bitter history of tensions. India has a no first use policy, while Pakistan has stated that they will use any weapon in their arsenal in order to defend their country. India has approximately 130 to 140 warheads as of current, and Pakistan has approximately 140 to 150. So in retaliation to a Pakistan-based terrorist attack which killed approximately 46 Indians in February of this year, India launched an airstrike on terrorist bases in Pakistan territory, which further escalated tensions. While tensions have mitigated recently, diplomacy and international intervention is critical in order to keep this going. So as a humanitarian impact of prior horrific atomics fade, thankfully, the youth of the country today face the issue of complacency. They have not witnessed the horrors of nuclear war, thankfully, which include nuclear winter, black carbon rain, burns, radiation exposure, and cancer, among other illnesses. But we must emphasize that nuclear weapons are a liability and not an asset. Through technology and artificial intelligence advances, including autonomous drones and smaller warheads, we can spur an arm race and cause mass destruction through a cheaper cost. New technology can also give terrorists access to cheap, long-range autonomous weapons, which isn't good for anyone.
There are many treaties that have been used to help non-proliferation. Among these, some of the most important are the NPT and TPNW. The NPT was first introduced in 1968 and ratified in 1970 with its aim to reduce and prevent development of nuclear weapons and curb their spread. However, there are challenges to the success of the NPT because this is a non-committal agreement which made many of the nuclear weapon states slow to reduce their arsenals, which is one of the issues toward non-proliferation. The TPNW is a legally binding contract that outlines the prohibition of nuclear weapons. However, this has only been ratified out of 21 out of the 70 states that have signed it. And in particular, there's been a lot of opposition from the nuclear weapon states because they believe that this will compromise their deterrence and political power. And in this way, there have been some challenges to non-proliferation and disarmament that need to be addressed in the future. The U.S.'s state policy is mainly outlined in the Nuclear Posture Review, most recently in 2018. This document is commissioned by the Pentagon at the direction of the U.S. President. So it was 2018 for Trump and 2014 for Obama. And in the 2018 edition, there were 4 main policy points and changes. So first of all, this posture review emphasized the use of low-yield nuclear weapons because the U.S. believes that low-yield nuclear weapons would be good for deterrence. For example, if other countries believe that the U.S. won't strike back with their high-yield nuclear weapons because that would lead to an escalation, the implementation of low-yield nuclear weapons is supposed to address that so there's no nuclear conflict in the first place. The second major point of the Nuclear Posture Review is their policy of usage. So the U.S. maintains ambiguous discretion as to when it would use nuclear weapons and reserves the right to use it even when an ally is attacked by non-nuclear weapons. They also explicitly and emphatically reject the no first use policy and could potentially use preemptive strikes to secure their national for their national security. And thirdly, they also prioritize sea-launched nuclear-armed missiles, whereas President Obama started dismantling this program during his presidency. President Trump believes, again, this is also important to their deterrence aspects as well. And fourthly, the United States maintains its policy with regard to other treaties, including the CTBT and the TPNW, stating that they will not ratify these treaties because they are not in accordance with the NPT and could lead to potential issues with national security. We'll be skipping that for time's sake.
We do have some policy recommendations that we like to go through. So while we have seen the warming of ties of countries in the previous years, we also constantly see treaties and agreements broken and countries fighting with each other. So we know that there is an inherent motivation to work with closer cooperation to address the nuclear threat. But once again, we must emphasize that nuclear weapons are liabilities and not assets. As Dr. William Perry said, deliberative preemptive strikes are not likely, but there is a grave danger of blundering into nuclear war. Our first policy recommendation is education and citizen engagement. Awareness through school curricula and history classes will allow youth to actively search for solutions and make a real change in the world. So for example, in the United States, local citizens can contact government representatives to start a congressional discussion on reducing and eliminating nuclear weapons. Next, we have youth empowerment. With instability on the rise, it is more important now than ever that the youth of the world take a proactive role in understanding and engaging in nuclear nonproliferation. Meetings like CIF are key to raising youth awareness in this field. Diplomacy. Engaging in conversations and talks with countries with whom you do not agree is not a sign of weakness. Rather, it is important to keep diplomacy in the forefront, especially when agreements and treaties are broken. Talking is a more effective tool than exchanging hostile words, breaking treaties, and walking away from agreements. Scientific diplomacy. When official government-to-government talks fail, scientific diplomacy can bridge the gap, increase collaboration, improve relations, and encourage communication. It is important for scientists to keep open lines of communication and open doors to promote cooperation and to prevent conflict. The loss of government support, funding, travel, and visa restrictions have created hurdles for the scientific community. The U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA agreement is not considered a responsible policy. Even though the Iran deal did not halt Iran's nuclear ambitions, nor did it address Iran's ability to nuclear breakout in a short period of time, the deal was able to keep a close eye on Iran's nuclear ambitions. The key to facilitate progress in bringing the TPNW into force is to bring nuclear weapon states into open discussions with them and engage in peace talks. This will help us look forward to a world without nuclear weapons and free of nuclear disasters. We also need stricter controls in place for enforcement of bilateral pacts, which govern the sale of nuclear technology to any non-nuclear weapon state. Launch on warning is complicated with cyber threats, but with social media and cybersecurity, we hope that we can encourage the no first use of nuclear weapons policy and put an end to hair trigger alerts of nuclear weapons and missiles. Finally, we must change the mindset that it is possible to achieve security and keep everybody safe with denuclearization and demilitarization. I've said this before and I will say it once again. Nuclear weapons are not an asset, but they are a liability. Thank you for listening, and we would like to take any questions.
Thank you so much, guys. If there are any questions on the floor, we do have microphones right here and right over there. We have time for about one question.
We'd also like to point out that in the back, outside this room, we have little bags with some of the Harker merch and our papers. The ones with bags are for the faculty and teachers, and students feel free to pick up the papers that are right next to them.